It's been a few months since my husband, who has a bad drinking habit, received a terminal illness diagnosis. He seems to think that it's me who's been diagnosed and has been living recklessly, drinking, having affairs. It's like he's doing whatever he wants. He even had a nerve to say something outrageous to me.
"You're really tough? Like a cockroach? Why don't you just die already?"
Even though he's the one who looks close to death, I wonder why he can't see it. To confront him with reality, I said something to him. "What are you talking about? It's you who's been given the terminal diagnosis."
"What?"
He just stood there with his mouth open, unable to comprehend my words. Looking into his eyes, I repeated myself. "I said it's you who has the terminal diagnosis." My name is Amy, and I'm 40 years old. If I had to describe my life in one word, it would be dramatic. I lost my parents in an accident when I was in 11th grade, and my relatives kept passing the buck, saying they couldn't afford to take care of me. Eventually, I ended up living with my father's sister, my aunt, but I was treated horribly there. I would be given noticeably less food than everyone else, and I often heard them wishing I would leave soon. My aunt already had 2 sons and probably couldn't afford to support me. I guess they had no choice but to act that way, being pushed into taking me in by the rest of the family. I leave this house as soon as I graduate from high school. With that determination, I started working part-time at a restaurant, and after a few years, my life took a turn. It was right after I started 12th grade.
"If you haven't decided on your future yet, why don't you marry me and live together?"
The man who made this proposal was my then boyfriend, now husband, Matthew. At that time, he was a full-time employee and my trainer at the part-time job. He was incredibly calm and great at teaching. We shared the same taste in music and quickly became a couple. "Thank you, but are you sure, Matthew? Won't it be a burden to have me in your life?"
"Not at all. I have enough savings to support you, Amy, and I'm more than happy to have you. Of course, only if you're okay with it. I know I have a bad drinking habit, but I'll cut back once we're married. I always put your happiness first. So, will you marry me?"
he said, taking my hand and smiling. Indeed, his bad drinking habit was his only flaw, but I loved him enough to overlook even that, and our relationship was good even after becoming a couple. That's why I happily accepted his proposal, and we got married after I graduated from high school. 2 years later, we were blessed with a child.
"Well done, Amy!"
When I told my husband I was pregnant, he lifted me up joyfully. Marrying the person I love and having his child, it was the pinnacle of happiness. At that time, I had no idea that such an event was waiting for us. The problem started a few months after our child was born. At that time, I was busy with childcare and household chores, and my husband frequently came home drunk from work-related socializing.
"I'm home,"
he'd say cheerily at the front door, and I, worried, would ask him, "Where have you been drinking until this late? And if you're going to be late because of drinking, I wish you'd let me know. I've been waiting with dinner ready." At that, my husband glared at me.
"Oh, shut up. It's my life."
Here we go again. At the beginning of our relationship, I used to be troubled by his bad drinking habits, but now that we were married, taking care of him had become easier. While dismissing his behavior, I urged him to drink some water.
"You know, you've aged."
"What?" He stared at me as he drank, and I was taken aback by his unexpected words.
"I mean, you've aged. You used to take care of yourself even at home, but now you're always in an old sweatshirt and sweatpants with no makeup. Why did you let yourself go like this?"
He looked me up and down as if assessing my whole appearance. There are things you can and cannot say, even to a husband with a bad drinking habit. I felt as if my efforts were being trampled on and couldn't help but retort. I can't help it. Household chores and childcare are hard, and I need to save every penny for Carter's future."
"Making excuses is the beginning of the end. I should never have married someone like you.
With that, he got upset and retreated to the bedroom. Matthew, have you always thought that way? I spent a sleepless night, filled with sorrow, realizing my husband might have always thought so. From that day, our relationship changed. It seemed that my normally kind husband got tired of pretending after that day. He began to say harsh words even when sober. When in a bad mood, he would kick or slap me. Light violence became a part of my life. Sometimes he would come home smelling of women's perfume, and though not confirmed, it's likely he was cheating. I've thought about divorce many times, but all I have in my bank account is the little money I saved from my part-time job days. In this situation, divorcing and supporting myself and my son would be impossible, and the thought of giving up custody of my son to him was unbearable. Besides, seeking alimony in a divorce case would require hiring a lawyer and other expenses. Considering all this, I couldn't divorce him for the sake of my son's future. One day, amid such days, an incident occurred.
Are you Amy, Matthew's wife? There's something about Matthew we need to discuss. Please come to the hospital.
The caller was from the hospital where my husband had a follow-up health check. Surprised by the sudden news, I rushed to the hospital.
Matthew is suffering from terminal cancer.
As I entered the hospital room and heard the doctor's words, I was at a loss for words. The doctor continued speaking as I stood there in shock.
It's difficult to say this, but Matthew only has about 6 months to live. We wanted to inform you first, Amy, before telling him directly, as it can be hard to hear.
Thank you. What should we do now?
There are several options. The choice depends on the patient and the family, so it might be best to discuss it with Matthew first.
The doctor's words left me unable to hide my turmoil. Despite his recent bad attitude towards me, I had deep feelings for my husband, having spent many years together.
I'll talk to him.
I left the hospital with heavy thoughts. What should I say to him? I couldn't find the right words, no matter how hard I tried to think. As I was contemplating this, my husband returned home.
I'm home!
Drunk as usual. He demanded water as soon as he entered the living room, treating me like a servant.
Actually, I have something important to talk about.
What's with a serious tone?
He started fiddling with his mobile phone after taking a sip of water.
Listen carefully. I have received a terminal diagnosis.
When I said this, he stopped scrawling and asked,
What did you say?
I said, I have received a terminal diagnosis.
Before I could clarify that it was he who was diagnosed, he asked,
Terminal cancer. The doctor said the family and the patient should decide what to do. What do you want to do?
Do whatever you want. It's not my problem.
Why are you acting like this doesn't concern you? It's a terminal diagnosis.
He paused, scrawling only for a moment, continuing to look at his phone even as I spoke.
It's not about me. Why you want me to worry? If you want sympathy, ask Carter.
That's not it. It's you.
Okay. End of discussion.
He left the living room and retreated to his room. I tried several times after that to bring up the terminal diagnosis, but he would cut me off before I could even start. Finally,
Don't talk about terminal diagnosis in front of me anymore, he said.
He won't even listen to me. Fine. Do as you please. A few months after my husband received his terminal diagnosis, it happened one morning while he was having breakfast.
Thanks for the meal.
In front of him was a barely touched breakfast. I asked him, looking pale,
Don't you have an appetite?
Yeah, lately I don't feel like eating much. I get short of breath even when walking, and maybe I'm losing strength. I'm off to work. I'll be late again today.
He left the house with a sigh. He still doesn't believe he's the one with the terminal diagnosis. I was amazed and cleared away his leftover breakfast. Honestly, seeing him like what was painful, but he had shattered my heart many times. He'd interrupt and refuse to listen whenever I tried to talk about the diagnosis. I no longer felt the need to help him, and he might as well leave out his remaining time in his delusion. With these thoughts, I began to tackle the day's household chores one by one. An unexpected visitor came to my usual day-to-day life. The doorbell rang after 3 p.m. When I opened the door, a young and beautiful woman was standing there.
Hello, my name is Michelle. I'm always grateful for Matthew's help,
she said, and I recognized the scent of the perfume that lingered when my husband returned home. It was clear, that she was the woman he was having an affair with. Michelle seemed to work part-time at my husband's workplace. I couldn't help but feel disdain for his method of preying on a vulnerable young woman from his workplace. What brings you here? Matthew is at work right now.
No, I came to talk to you today, Amy. I'll be blunt. Please divorce Matthew,
she said, looking straight into my eyes.
Divorce? It's not that simple. We're married.
I know, but Amy, you don't have long to live, right? Then please, give him to me soon.
Clearly, Michelle also misunderstood that I was the one who received a terminal diagnosis and pressed on with the conversation.
Matthew is kind and financially stable, truly reliable. He even bought me this brand name bag. And he's been so supportive, even knowing I have no parents. You don't understand Matthew's kindness, do you, Amy?
At that moment, I felt a certain kinship with her. Our situations were similar, and she reminded me of myself when I was younger and in love with my husband. A young and beautiful woman like her shouldn't be seeking her own unhappiness. Before she regretted getting involved with my husband, I asked her something. Don't you realize you really received a terminal diagnosis? By looking at Matthew and me.
What?
Michelle was taken aback, not expecting such a question. You work with Matthew, right? He's pale, gets out of breath easily, while here I am, standing and talking to you without any sign of tiredness, my complexion healthy. Who do you think is really terminally ill?
That would be you, Amy, because Matthew said so.
Michelle looked at me, uncertain. Perhaps she was beginning to realize the truth. Besides, Matthew's money is almost gone.
What?
She was shocked again. With all the drinking and spending he does, and you must be enjoying most of those benefits, right? I bet he's given you more than just that bag. If Matthew is the one with a terminal diagnosis, you'll have a hard time ahead. Hospital bills, living expenses. Do you still want Matthew? Michelle, seemingly at a loss for words about Matthew, trembled and said,
Excuse me,
before leaving. I doubted that Michelle believed everything I said. However, if it made her reconsider even a little, that would be enough. I watched the door she had exited through, lost in thought. That night, for a change, my husband came home sober, but he clearly looked exhausted. When I asked why he sighed, he said he had tried to work as usual, but couldn't keep up his strength and had to take several breaks, which angered his boss.
Are you okay? You're really tough like a cockroach.
As he muttered, I gave him a cold look. What are you talking about? You're the one with a terminal diagnosis.
What?
He stood there, mouth open, unable to comprehend my words. I said you're the one who's been diagnosed.
Hey, wait a minute. You're joking, right?
He shook my shoulders as he said this. I wouldn't joke about this. Looking at your recent health and complexion, isn't it obvious who's terminally ill? I answered calmly while he shook my shoulders.
You kept quiet about this?
Of course not. You just misunderstood on your own. I tried to tell you, but you didn't want to listen, so I stayed quiet.
Bastard!
Enraged by my words, he raised his hand in anger, expecting to be hit. I closed my eyes, but no pain came. When I slowly opened my eyes, I saw my son stopping my husband's hand from hitting me.
Dad, stop it!
What? Talking back to your father?
My husband was still furious, even towards our son, but he couldn't easily shake off his hand. Uncomfortable, he finally let go and retreated to his room. Mom, are you okay? I heard Dad yelling from my room. My son calls out to me. Thank you, Carter. Really, thank you. Oh, my child has grown up so much. I might not know what would have happened without him. With feelings of gratitude for his growth, I thank him repeatedly. Then my son made a suggestion. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, my husband entered the living room awkwardly.
Good morning. Sorry for getting angry yesterday,
he said, standing next to me, and I turned to him with displeasure. What? Why are you suddenly so meek?
No, I want to apologize for everything. I'm really sorry.
He apologized deeply.
Why are you suddenly apologizing like this?
No, I just realized I need you. Will you stay with me until the end? We are a married couple who've been through a lot together, right?
His unexpected words made me laugh derisively. A married couple who've been through a lot? Don't make me laugh. And what about a girl you were having an affair with?
That girl, Michelle? She hasn't returned my messages since last night, and I can't reach her by phone.
So that's why he's turning to me. According to my husband, as soon as he learned from me that he was the one with the terminal diagnosis, he immediately messaged Michelle, expecting a prompt message of concern from her, but there was no reply. Watching my pitiful husband, I felt relieved that Michelle had escaped from his harm.
So you're the only one I can rely on. Please, I'm begging you.
What do you really want? I won't understand unless you say it clearly. After a while, my husband seemed to have made up his mind, and with a deeper apology, he said,
Please, lend me the money for hospitalization.
No. How will you pay it back? It's your own fault, so deal with it yourself. Besides, even if you get hospitalized, you're not going to make it. Do you really need to be in the hospital? When I said that, my husband continued,
Yeah, I know I'm not going to make it, but if I have to suffer like this at home without any medication, I'd rather be hospitalized and die a little more peacefully.
I see. That's what he's after. He wants me to pay for his hospitalization. I couldn't help but smile at my husband's ridiculousness. Seeing my expression, he seemed to finally feel relieved, thinking I had forgiven him, unaware of the worst situation awaiting him. Absolutely not. You're only being convenient now that it's disadvantageous for you, I said bluntly, and then presented the divorce papers I had kept in my apron pocket. I want a divorce.
Hey, are you going to abandon your husband, who you've spent years with and who has only a little time left?
Abandon? You abandoned me a long time ago. When I said that, my husband hesitated to speak, then asked with a hint of dissatisfaction.
But what will you do from now on? About Carter's education, where to live?
Don't worry. Carter is planning to drop out of school and work. He's interested in car mechanics, and a friend's parents run a garage. They've offered to let Carter and me work and live there. It's fortunate to have such good friends. Until Carter drops out, I plan to stay at my relative's house. It's much better than living here. Honestly, I've been wanting to divorce you for a long time. The only reason I didn't was because of Carter. But now that Carter's future is decided, there's no need for me to stay. As I spoke firmly, my husband realized he could no longer hold me back and stared at me in disbelief. Then sign these divorce papers right now. I'll be organizing Carter's and my things in the meantime. A moving company will come later. Please, cooperate then. Saying this, I saw my husband's face, worn out, and looking at me with pleading eyes until the end. He would likely spend his last days in this house. I sympathized, but it was his punishment for years of persecution. So, goodbye, Matthew. I closed the door of my home. Later, I heard from a mutual friend that my ex-husband had passed away. His family gathered for the funeral. I would probably be blamed for not being there in his last moments if I attended. I had no intention of going to a place where such negative assumptions could be made. However, after a few years, when my feelings had settled, I visited a certain place with my son. You don't have to pay respects to such men. Hey, don't speak like that. The place we visited was my ex-husband's grave. A mutual friend told me where it was, in a cemetery, where he now rested. Honestly, I never wanted to involve myself with my ex-husband again, but I wanted to report to him that our son had grown up so much. But I wouldn't come here again, because we were moving out of state. Since then, Carter worked while gaining practical experience as a mechanic and successfully obtained his automotive mechanic certification. He's set to work in a garage out of state from spring. Let's go back. We still have to prepare for the move. As I said this and stood up to call Carter, he didn't move.
Mom, do you regret marrying Dad?
He asked, looking at me. What are you saying? If I hadn't married Matthew, he wouldn't have been born. I'm proud of you, Carter, for trying so hard to save me from Matthew. Thank you for being born. As I said this, my son shyly thanked me. Looking forward to my son's future, we left my ex-husband's grave behind.